I want to start today by putting you in a very specific, very heated moment in history. It's 1888. We are in the south of France in the town of Arles. The heat is just oppressive, and we're standing inside this small yellow house.
The famous yellow
The
house.
famous yellow house, the headquarters of the Studio of the South.
Right.
And living in this house, you have two of the most volatile, brilliant, and difficult men to ever pick up a paintbrush, Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin. They are living together, working side by side. You can almost smell the turpentine, the stale tobacco smoke. You can see the thick, wet oil paint on canvases stacked against the walls. It's an incredibly physical, tactile environment.
It's the definition of analog. I mean, it's messy, it's emotional, and it is deeply, deeply human.
Exactly. Now take that image, the sweat, the paint, all that emotion, and just imagine putting it into a blender.
Okay.
But not a physical blender. Imagine stripping away the canvas, the pigment, the history, everything until the only thing left is a cold, hard stream of zeros and ones.
That's a violent shift.
Huh.
You're talking about taking something almost sacred and turning it into raw data.
That is exactly where we are going today. We're looking at a stack of research around a video work by an artist named Kenji Kojima. And the work has a title that, frankly, sounds more like a dissertation than an art piece.
It does.
It's called Binary Interpretation of the Arles Period of Paul Gauguin, Vincent van Gogh in Arles in 1888.
It's a mouthful. But I think the dryness of that title is actually a clue. It tells you immediately this is not about romanticizing these painters. It's about processing them.
Yeah, when I first saw the show notes, I have to admit, I was skeptical. I thought, okay, great, someone put a digital filter on the sunflowers.
Right. We see that on Instagram every day.
But as I read through Kojima's background and his actual process, I realized this is something completely different. This isn't a filter. It's more like an interrogation.
That's a great word for it. Kojima isn't interested in making a pretty version of Van Gogh. He's interested in exposing what he calls the material structure of the digital image. And this is a concept we really need to nail down because it anchors this whole deep dive.
Material structure. See, to me, material means wood, stone, oil paint, things I can touch. But we're talking about a video file, so what's the material?
In the digital world, the material is data.
Yeah.
Pure and simple. Kojima takes these masterpieces from 1888, he digitizes them into pixels, and then he reduces those pixels down to their absolute floor.
The binary code.
The binary code, the fundamental language of the machine.
Zeros and ones.
That's the clay he is sculpting with. But here's the key. He doesn't just display the image. He subjects that binary data to algorithms that introduce what the research calls temporal delay and fragmentation.
I watched the clips in the source material, and fragmentation is putting it mildly. These images, they almost breathe, they flicker. You're looking at a portrait of the postman Roland, and suddenly his face just dissolves into this cascade of digital noise, just static, and then it snaps back into focus. It feels unstable.
Unstable visual fields. That is the specific phrase Kojima uses. And it's not an accident. He's not trying to simulate, a bad internet connection. He's introducing controlled randomness.
Yeah. Okay, let's pause on that. He also calls it binary misalignment. That sounds like tech speak for, what, breaking the file on purpose?
That's a good way to put it, actually.
Why would an artist take a masterpiece and deliberately break it?
Well, think about the gap between the two worlds. On one side, you have Van Gogh. He's painting with these aggressive, emotional gestures.
Yeah.
The brushstroke is a direct record of his hand moving. It's human. On the other side, you have the computer. It doesn't know what a face is. It doesn't know what a sunflower is.
It only knows the numbers.
It only knows 00101101. Exactly. So by introducing these glitches, these moments where the image tears apart, Kojima is forcing us to see that gap. He's showing us the translation error. He's reminding us that a digital image is, in a way, a lie. It's a reconstruction.
It's like he's stripping the varnish off. Usually, technology tries to be invisible, right? We want 4K, retina displays, perfect clarity. We want to forget we're looking at a screen.
Right.
Kojima's doing the opposite. He's screaming, look at the screen, look at the pixels, this is not a pipe.
And by doing that, he turns the painting into a time-based process. A canvas on a wall is static. It sits there forever. Kojima's version is a performance. It's the computer struggling to remember the painting, failing, and then trying again.
It feels incredibly fragile.
Which is so ironic because we think of computers as these perfect, logical vaults of information. He shows us the chaos just underneath.
Now, to really get why someone would dedicate their life to, shredding Van Goghs into code, I think we have to look at the man himself. Because Kenji Kojima's backstory is, well, it's not what I expected.
No, you'd expect a digital native, maybe. Someone who grew up hacking or something.
Instead, we find a guy who spent the first 10 years of his career in New York painting with egg tempera.
That stopped me in my tracks when I read that. Egg tempera is medieval.
Literally medieval. It predates oil painting.
Yeah, you're grinding raw pigment from the earth. You're mixing it with egg yolk and water. It's chemistry. It's slow. It's painstaking. It's so connected to the physical world.
The sources say he did this because he wanted to understand the history of European art creation through the actual materials. He wanted to feel the weight of that history in his hands.
So he spends a decade mastering this ancient, heavy technique. And then in the early 90s, he just pivots hard.
He stops painting, switches to computers.
And the reason wasn't that he got bored or something. It was ethological.
It was guilt.
Guilt, yes.
Which I found so relatable. He looked around his studio at the canvases, the wood stretchers, the chemicals, the pigments, and he felt like he was wasting materials in the name of art.
It's a heavy realization. Art has a carbon footprint. It takes up space, it uses resources. And in the 90s, the PC was on the rise. And to Kojima, digital art felt clean.
He called it lighter.
He taught himself programming because he wanted to create systems that didn't leave a physical scar on the world. But, and I think this is the brilliant part, he didn't stop being a painter.
What do you mean by that?
He took that obsession with materials, which used to be egg yolk and pigment, and he applied it to his new material, data.
Yeah.
He treats code with the same reverence and curiosity that he treated the pigments. He wants to know what the grain of the data feels like.
That actually explains so much. It explains why he isn't just using some pre-made software or filter. If you're a master painter, you mix your own paints.
Exactly.
If you're Kojima, you write your own code. You need to control the medium at its most atomic level.
You do. And that obsession with the material brings us to one of the most intense parts of this Arles project, the sound.
Oh man, the sound. If you haven't watched the video, you might expect some nice classical music, maybe some Debussy to set the mood.
And instead you get
digital screaming. It's this glitchy, rhythmic, electronic noise. And my first thought was, okay, he's trying to be edgy. He picked some techno track to contrast with the old paintings.
But that's the thing, he didn't pick the track at all.
No. And this, for me, was the real aha moment. The sound is the painting.
Right. Kojima generated the audio directly from the same RGB color data that he used to create the visuals.
Can you walk us through that? How does a color become a sound?
Well, in a computer, a specific shade of yellow, like the yellow in Van Gogh's sun, is defined by a set of numbers. Red, green, and blue values.
Okay.
Kojima wrote a program that reads those numbers and translates them directly into sound frequency.
So if I'm looking at that intense yellow sky in Arles, I am literally hearing the data for that yellow color.
Yes. You are hearing the color's code. It's a completely unified audiovisual structure.
Which means when the image glitches on the screen, when it pixelates and breaks, the sound must glitch too.
It has to, because they're both reading the exact same stream of zeros and ones. It just reinforces that idea of the material structure. He isn't adding music to a video, he is letting the data speak.
It's true synesthesia, but it also kind of removes the artist's ego, doesn't it? He's not composing a melody, he's just saying, here's what Van Gogh sounds like if you run him through a processor.
Right, it creates this total immersion in the logic of the machine. But I want to pivot slightly, because Kojima's been doing this for decades. The source material highlights a more recent project from 2023. It's called Bitwise Splitting and Merging of Pixels. And this feels like a direct response to the conversation we are all having right now about artificial intelligence.
This is the elephant in the room. We live in the world of Midjourney, of DALL-E. I can type Van Gogh painting of a spaceship into a prompt box, and in 4 seconds, I have an image.
And it looks incredible. But Kojima poses a very difficult question in his 2023 statement. He asked, with the development of generative AI, can we create visual art that is not an assemblage of past visual data?
Wait, let's unpack that. Assemblage of past visual data. Isn't that what AI is at its core?
Fundamentally, yes. Generative AI works on probability. It scrapes billions of images from the internet, including Van Gogh, and it studies them. When you ask for a new image, it's predicting what pixels likely go where based on everything it has seen.
It's a collage machine. It mimics style.
It's looking at 1,000 Van Goghs to fake a new one. Now compare that to what Kojima's doing. He's not generating new images. He is performing bitwise operations on a specific existing image.
Okay, bitwise operations. That sounds incredibly technical. Can you break that down for us?
Let's try an analogy. Imagine a painting is a deck of cards laid out on a table to form a mosaic picture.
Okay, I'm with you.
Generative AI looks at that deck of cards, studies the pattern, and then it prints out a new deck of cards that looks sort of similar. It's a copy, a simulation based on averages. Got it, Kojima. He takes the original deck of cards, the actual source file, and he starts shuffling the individual cards according to a strict mathematical rule. He isn't adding any new cards, he isn't printing anything new, he is rearranging the atomic structure of the original.
So he's engaging with the digital DNA of that specific file rather than just the vibe of the image.
That's the perfect way to put it. He uses encryption and decryption logic to scramble and unscramble the pixels. It's deterministic, not probabilistic. He's showing us the malleability of the data itself, not asking a robot to dream for him.
And that brings us right back to why he chose Van Gogh and Gauguin for the Arles project. Because knowing what we know now about his process, the deck of cards, the shuffling, it completely changes how I view that collaboration between those two painters.
It adds a layer of tragedy, doesn't it?
Well, think about their history. Van Gogh is pure emotion, messy, passionate. Gauguin is calculated, symbolic, arrogant. They fought constantly in that yellow house. They saw the world through completely different lenses.
And Kojima traps them both in the same computational framework.
He forces them to collaborate again, but this time inside the machine.
And by subjecting both of their works to the same bitwise operations, the same glitches, the same audio generation, he's making this profound point about the instability of meaning.
It's a leveling field. The computer doesn't care that Van Gogh cut off his ear in a fit of mania. It doesn't care about Gauguin's theories on color.
It just sees zeros and ones.
It shows that whether you are a romantic genius or a calculated symbolist, once you become a JPEG, you are subject to the same cold logic. You can both be deleted or corrupted just as easily.
And speaking of deleted, there is a really poignant story in the research about the fragility of this kind of art. We tend to think digital things last forever.
Once it's on the internet, it's forever, right?
That is the great myth of the digital age.
The notes mention a specific piece of software Kojima developed, RGB Music Lab, back in 2007. He built this tool himself to create these audio-visual works.
He was a pioneer. He wrote the code to make the art possible. But then, the inevitable happened.
The operating system updated.
And the software stopped running.
This is the curse of modern tech. You buy a program, and 3 years later, your computer says, sorry, this app is no longer supported.
But for an artist, that's catastrophic. Imagine if Van Gogh painted the sunflowers, and 5 years later, the atmosphere changed, and the paint just slid right off the canvas.
That's a terrifying thought. So his egg tempera paintings from the 1980s, those medieval physical objects, those will last for, what, 500 years?
Easily. They're archival. But his high-tech code from 2007, it died after a few years.
So what did he do? How do you save art that depends on a dead operating system?
He had to adapt. The sources say he had to start recording video of the artwork while the software was still running.
So the video we watch isn't really the artwork, it's a documentary of the artwork.
Exactly. He's preserving the performance of the code before the code becomes obsolete. The video is basically formaldehyde. It's the only way to keep the idea alive after its ecosystem dies.
It really reframes that whole idea of lightness that attracted him to digital art in the first place. He wanted to get away from the heavy burden of physical materials, but he traded it for a medium that is constantly, decaying.
It highlights that digital art is actually incredibly fragile. It depends on this massive infrastructure, servers, electricity, operating system, specific drivers that is constantly shifting. If one link in that chain breaks, the art vanishes.
Which brings us to the final sort of philosophical layer of Kojima's work. Why go through all this trouble? Why fight the updates, the glitches, the code? What's the point?
The source material mentions his theory on what he calls perceptual filters. And this is where Kojima gets really profound.
Lay it on me.
Kojima believes that human perception is basically a filter. The world around us, reality is absolute chaos. Infinite light, infinite sound, infinite data. If we let it all in at once, we'd go crazy. We couldn't function.
So our eyes and our ears act like firewalls. We only let in what we need to build a coherent picture of the world.
We are constantly deciphering the code of reality. And Kojima's project is a mirror of that process. He takes the chaos of the binary data, which is unintelligible to us on its own, and he filters it through his algorithms so we can see it.
But here's the twist. He doesn't give us a clean filter.
No.
He gives us a glitchy one.
He shows us the struggle. By letting the image break apart and come back together, he's reminding us that our view of reality is constructed. It's not a given. The picture was never stable to begin with.
It's like he's pulling back the curtain on our own brains. We started this deep dive in 1888 with the heat and the paint. We moved to the 1980s grinding pigments in a New York studio, and we ended up deep inside the arithmetic logic unit of a processor.
It's a journey from the tactile to the abstract and then back again.
And what stays with me is that Kojima doesn't seem to say one is better than the other. He isn't saying digital is bad or paint is good. He's just showing us that they can coexist, even if that coexistence is messy.
And the mess is where the humanity is, even inside the machine.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with today. We spend our lives looking at screens. Your memories, your photos of your kids, your emails, this very conversation you're listening to right now. It's all just binary code stored on a magnetic disk somewhere.
It's all just material structure, zeros and ones.
If everything we love is just data, does it lose its aura? Does a Van Gogh become less magical when it's just a string of numbers? Or does the glitch, that moment where the system fails and the image tears apart, actually make it more real because it shows us the fragile medium holding it all together?
And it makes you wonder, what happens when the operating system of our cultural memory updates and the old software just stops running?
Something to chew on the next time your laptop forces you to restart for an update. Thanks for diving in with us. See you next time.